Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of the Point of No Return podcast, a show where we interview industry leaders, presidents, and CEOs to better understand how they think about strategy. On today's show, I had the pleasure of speaking with Rachel Labbe-Bellas, founder at OLand Stations. Rachel is really a special entrepreneur, and you can really see that she's someone that's mission driven. Rachel's background, she's a marine ecologist and has a BSc in biology from McGill University and an MSc in ecology from UFSC in Brazil. She's traveled the world and decided to take her skills to build a startup focused on plastic pollution reduction, which is called Green Stop, also now called OLand Stations. We spoke a lot about her startup, how she fell in love with the water. We joked a little bit about being a marine biologist, how she solves her lens of solving important problems through entrepreneurship, which I found really interesting. We spoke about her startup journey and, of course, how she had to pivot during the pandemic, where there was obviously no more festivals happening. We spoke about the state of renewables, how she sees and investment opportunities in her industry. So it was a really interesting conversation. We were joined by her son, her newborn son, that made a few intros during the call and participated in our conversation. And also, I'd like to give a shout out to Mark McLean that made the introduction to Rachel. And then maybe a final few points. I have a few interesting announcements coming up on the podcast, as well as the Young Leader series that we're still getting people on. So stay tuned for that. And with that, onto the show. Thank you for listening. So, Rachel, a first question. First off, thanks for being on the show. I noticed, obviously, in your background and doing a little bit of research, that you're an actual marine biologist, having studied it. I guess the stupid question is, how often do you get jokes about Seinfeld? Does it happen often, or am I just like a weirdo that thinks of this?
No, it happens often if you are from the East Coast of North America. They all make the relationship, but if you live in California, they never say it. They never have made the link. So
How,
you're just like all my friends in Montreal.
okay, good. So I feel a little normal. How did you get
Yeah.
in? How did you fall in love with water? It looks like you've loved the space almost as a young kid. Look
Yeah.
at your background.
Yeah. Well, I grew up here in Montreal. I was born and raised in the West Island. Then I went to university, but as a northeastern kid, we don't have much ocean access. I grew up in a swimming pool, community pool, so swim team, water polo, and then, like true Canadian, for March break, I went away with my family when I was really young, and I already really loved the water, and I went to it was terrible at the time, but it was a dolphin discovery center, and I didn't know that they were in captivity, and neither did my parents. But I fell in love with the ocean, and I secretly went to see the instructor after I did that, experience with the family and the dolphins swimming around you. And I said, I'm going to come back one day and here and work with you. And I was like 10 years old. So that stuck with me. And I made it a determination to become a marine biologist. And from that time.
Wow, wow. So that's finding
Yeah.
your purpose early. That's definitely
Yeah.
um, so fast forward now to university, you're studying to be a marine biologist.
Hmm.
How did you select for a career choice in the sense of like you have your degree or you're about to get your degree? It
Yeah.
seems like you followed a few different paths after you graduated. So curious to hear,
Hmm.
about that time in your life.
Sure. Technically, I decided what type of marine biology I wanted to do. And there was, more like warmer climate areas of research. So I focused on a lot of internships and doing my master's in Brazil. And then when I graduated, I said, well, what kind of work can I do in this field to actually, make a living and make an impact? And I really liked research and academics, but I didn't want just like my research to just sit in a library and have inspire another student. So I said, well, how can I like connect my science with society, with real life things? So I ventured into nonprofit work. So I worked in development and fundraising for NGOs in California. And then I worked at a research institute as well in California that had a lab and did like high level research around the world in ocean and oceanographic institutes. And then again, being in that area, I was like, okay, I'm advocating for ocean conservation. I'm doing all these cool stuff with sharks and corals and whatnot. And I could continue to get a PhD and be a researcher, but I still felt like a need to push farther ahead and do entrepreneurship, because to me it was the best way to vocalize a solution, and rather than just advocate for it online, I needed to create a physical solution.
What led you to that insight of like I need to start a company? Because I noticed that also
Mm-hmm.
you identified several problems about like the world, like notably climate change, pollution, etc.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Was there one key insight, or was it just like, let's say, the mountain of evidence of like more
Yeah.
humans are really harming the planet and I need to do something about it?
Yeah, I mean, the one key wake up call was going to work one day and saying, I've been dedicating my life to ocean conservation, and I'm sitting in this beautiful institute, like high end, very highly reputable. And I was opening up drawers and looking at conference rooms and seeing all the single use waste. And I was like, wait a second, like even marine scientists and infrastructures and systems aren't in place to facilitate, and even us that care so much about saving our planet. So I was like, we've got to find alternatives. I need to start a station. I need to build a physical thing that helps transition away from single-use plastics. And at the time, I wasn't seeing any infrastructure like my water stations that were able to help us get there. So that was the click. That was like, I need to build something.
Yeah, you're like, yeah, you've had enough. Before we talk
Yeah,
about Green Stop,
yeah.
maybe just out of personal curiosity, what do you think is the biggest challenge we have with the oceans right now? Like, I see you as one of the rare experts that
Mhm.
knows about this field deeply. What do you think is, how should I ask the question? What's the
Biggest
biggest
challenge.
issue, the biggest challenge exactly?
I mean, the biggest challenge, I guess, is management. And I mean, I think what's happening now is, okay, countries are starting to take responsibility, and governments are starting to pass legislations and stuff like that about bans. But management is really not necessarily transparent. And the problem is everyone's looking at the dumping and the end of cycle or the end of life where it's already in the ocean. That's not where we need to focus our efforts. We need to look upstream, and we need to stop this at the corporate level, at the manufacturing level, and we need to like create extreme reduction. We can't focus on like clean up solutions, although it's useful. It has a place. It's not, it's not the strong point. It's like when your nose bleeds, where do you stop it? Where do you stop your nosebleed? Do you clean up every single drop, or do you hold the source? So that's the analogy that I give, and that's why I said I need to create a company that promotes an alternative to end of life or waste. I don't want to pick up garbage from the ocean and transform it into something else. That's already too far down the chain. We need to create like a circular economy business where our solution already tackles it and prevents it from the start.
Yeah, I find that's such a great analogy, right? Like stopping at the source essentially. So no one's focused on
Mm-hmm.
prevention. Seems like all
Mm-hmm.
the clips that we get to see are like, hey, we need to clean the oceans. But it's
Mm-hmm.
like if we just keep dumping stuff in them, like we're gonna keep doing this for how long, right?
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
so that led you to wanting to start your own company. That led you to to the idea of Green Stop. So maybe I'd like to like for the audience, what is Green Stop?
Mhm. Sure. So the Green Stop essentially is a kind of a platform for refill. It's an infrastructure, so it's a station right now. It looks as a hexagonal unit, but the large vision of the Green Stop was a place to have this platform serve as an alternative to single-use plastics. So to dispense things or refill things that you might often have to have single-use items or single-use packaging for. So originally, I thought, okay, these green stops could be on the beaches in California, and they could dispense interesting things like sunscreen or water, of course, because it's an essential need. And as well, it could have other items in it. But getting simple and learning about startups, you need to build an MVP, and you need to go for one big pain and one big need. And since I kind of pivoted a little and moved back to Canada to start this company, it was an easier ride since I'm Canadian and have a bigger support network here, of course. I realized, well, at the time, where can I make an impact, and where can I start the Green Stop? Well, I said there's lots of waste from our famous festivals and our big events, and we're the number one city in North America for free shows and free events. So, of course, we're heavily hit right now with COVID. But I thought, why don't we make a water station to provide these infrastructures that are missing at a lot of these events where people are forced to get water bottles and feel shitty and then have all this garbage come out. So now the Green Stop is a water refill station. Then it's already evolved a little bit, and it pivoted again in 2020 to a hand washing station to help reduce waste from this new sanitary crisis we're facing. So it has many faces, but we're focusing on these two products right now. So we've rebranded and we're calling them O''Land, OLand, kind of like my little kid's name Island right here. And they are OLand fill stations and OLand wash stations.
Yeah, that's great. I like also your pivot and being able to be agile. Obviously, when we're in lockdown and there's zero
Mm-hmm.
festivals happening, right? So it also obviously can hurt your business. So you said, well,
Mm-hmm.
we're also creating a lot of waste by washing our hands. So how does the refill station work for hand washing?
Yeah, so they're essentially were already just water dispensing stations, right? So I changed the taps to become more of a tap for hand washing, and then I added a sink down below.
Okay.
So I mean,
Yeah.
it's just as useful. Excuse me, I'm going to place him down to give
Sure.
him a try here. Um, but hey, he's good. Hey, he's hanging out with the fish.
He's been great so far.
Yeah, I know. He's in a good mood. So going back to the hand washing stations, the only addition really is that they are like more adjusted to actually be sinks. So it's like 6 sinks altogether rather than 6 bottle filling spots, and accompanied with a sensor operated tap. And both stations now have been adapted for COVID safe, so they maintain the social distancing between the sinks with separation panels, and then they are entirely contactless.
Yeah. Have you thought of the next evolution, right? Like it seems like
Mm-hmm.
you've kind of like obviously big success with Oceaga from what I can tell in terms of like being able to reduce waste, these one-time wastes at festivals. But
Mm-hmm.
maybe again moving more upstream, like what's your vision to be able to have a bigger impact?
My vision is not to just stick to dispensing water. These are literally really cool looking infrastructures that could easily dispense many things. So we can work with beer companies and dispense beer at events, or we could become like a dispensing stations in large company cafeterias for many things. We can work with, I mean, the big vision could be like a partnership with someone like Coca-Cola, where they've been trying to change their packaging for years, and there's a little bit of uncertainty if they really want to change their packaging, because I think that's where they make most of their profits. It's not on actually the beverage inside. However, there's still hope, and maybe a large company like that would want to embark with me to eliminate altogether the package and still dispense their product.
It's interesting, yeah, because it seems like these big companies, their business model has been set for years, right? And their
Mm-hmm.
iconic packaging, right? Like that's it's something that I imagine they've spent hundreds of millions, if not more, developing. And now it has to become
Mm-hmm.
this kind of like single use, kind of completely change. What do you think will be a driving factor to get them to switch? Like I imagine it has to be dollars and cents driven. So how can we innovate for it to
Mm-hmm.
become economically an economic imperative for them?
Yeah, economically viable. I mean, they could still charge for, you could do a rev share model where they could still charge per beverage. They could, I mean, save money in the sense of now they have to get their product from A to B, right? And it's like the end user's front door step, or for example. But maybe now there can be like, it's going to have to take a little bit of user behavior and dollar incentive. changes, because there could be some sort of shift, and there is, as you see in more and more grocery stores are having these refill stores where you go and you refill the product in bulk. So that's kind of the direction I think that companies, large consumer packaged good companies could go towards, rather than worrying about getting the single-use package to every single person's doorstep. That could save them money, because it saves them dollars on how to design the product and make sure that it's like 8 times wrapped so it doesn't break all the way to your front door. So that, I mean, that's not the solid answer, but that's maybe a possibility and a way that they could see it as a financial, it's not a financial hit, and they can still ensure that their product looks good, does good for the environment, and is enjoyed by many people.
Do you believe in like government intervention, or think it's going to take kind of like what you're doing,
Yeah,
bottoms up entrepreneurship to figure out solutions and make it more viable, or can the government play a role?
I very much believe in government intervention. In the Western world, where we feel like we control everything and we feel like gods, maybe it's a little bit harder. But in countries where they had zero even waste management systems in place, government intervention has done like so much work. And one of the nonprofits I work for, I still consult for them, because startups don't pay you for what is the average. After 5 years, you maybe start taking a salary. But one of the nonprofits I work for in Los Angeles, called Gyres Institute, we talk a lot about this law about the open oceans with MARPOL, and it was about ocean dumping. And the fact that this law was put in place, I think in the early 90s, that has stopped dumping from happening, or illegal dumping, had a really profound effect on the amount of pollution that was found or coming up in the oceans. Right after that, you actually see a drop. So because of this universal, countrywide, global effort to put a stop to ocean dumping, we did see a drastic reduction in waste for a couple of years, and then after that, well, it kept going up. But Canada seems to want to do well, and had some momentum on the single-use plastic bans, which sounds great and everything. But then what worries me is government has a role. They are great to put bans, but then they need to already think about what they're going to put instead of those products. So companies like mine need to already be implemented. They can't just have this time when, okay, we used to have single-use items and then now there's nothing, and outright ban them. You have to have a replacement ready and lined up, so users and consumers have an option to transition to.
Yeah. Do you see any countries that are leading the battle, that are at the forefront? It seems like there's a big disparity in terms of like how countries are attacking this problem.
Yeah, I mean, there's like lots of trickles of good examples everywhere. There's for water stations like mine, the city of Paris has had a wonderful water drinking system in place for a couple of years now. It's called Eau de Paris, and everyone fills their own water bottles up with sparkling. Even they have gasified water for free on tap in tons of areas throughout the city of Paris. So that's a great example of someone and France was doing pretty good as well on single-use bans. This was in 2019, and 2020 to me seems all like a blur. So they were kind of at the forefront of taking efforts. And then there's examples from around the world. I mean, there's companies in India that were making food utensils out of biodegradable food. So the forks and knives were going to be made out of, I'm not sure which chemical, or which ingredient, but I think it was starch or avocado or something. So examples around the world of alternatives to using polymer-based plastics to make single-use items.
Yeah, it's interesting. Yeah, it seems like we're still early days, and it seems like for GreenStop, you're still a few years into your startup, so you're still at that
Mm-hmm.
path. But it seems like we're almost, considering we're still in the pandemic, it feel like the conversation around renewables and clean energy, essentially everything that has to do with sustainability, is now really starting to take a bigger prominent role. So curious as how,
Yeah.
what's your strategy
Yeah.
to capitalize it for Green Stop? Are you going to, maybe look to raise money? Are you looking to hire? So just curious to hear you more on the business strategy side.
Mm. Sure. Well, right now, I mean, I did a couple years of really trying to establish myself as the foundations of the business, right? Learning entrepreneurship and like the 101 stuff. Now I'm in an incubator slash partnership program called Montreal Lab, and we have really great strategic partners there. And my strategy right now is that I think there's 11 partners at this hub, and I can, with my hand washing station and my water refill station, I can help 9 out of 11 of them in sense of them implement my solution, because now everyone necessarily needs to increase their sanitary measures. A lot of large scale companies have a desire to have a green report or do waste reductions where they can. So I'm working with potentially the Palais des Congrès in Montreal. Other strategic partners that would be interesting for me are companies like the airport. We have the national parks, the Quebec parks, the CEPAC parks. So all access points where visitors need to kind of ensure safety in terms of hygiene and also reduce their impact on the environment. That's kind of where I'm heading. As you know, festivals are on pause, so we can't. We were excited to test, and festivals really wanted our solutions because they need this quick setup and set down, and they wanted to rent from us. But now we've shifted entirely to selling these units and having them pre-built, trying to sell mainly in Quebec right now, but we need to sell anywhere we can. So large venues that need to have access for visitors to have safe water drinking and safe hand washing. Those are our targets. So if it's going to be in North America wide, then we're ready. We'll be, once we get our product tested and out there, which is it's ready now. So I could deploy it tomorrow, indoor, outdoor, before the freezing, of course, before the snow comes. But once we show that it's really useful, it's durable, it has a tracking system so we can gauge how much water is used, and that in turn shows us how much water bottles we're saving, and also we could estimate how many hands we're washing as well based on water usage and time, an average time that you wash your hands. So these types of like user behaviors are really interesting for these clients that need to now insert these types of sanitary and behavioral measures.
Yeah, it seems super interesting. Like you're not resting on your laurels and really pushing forward
Mm-hmm.
in terms of your business model. So you're really standing standalone. Is there any recurrence to your model, or is it really you just sell standalone the unit and then you're essentially trying to spread to as many different like companies slash
Mm-hmm.
organizations as possible? So
When you mean
sorry,
recurrence, you mean like other services?
like a monthly, yeah, like a monthly fee, any kind of like services that are added over and above, or is it people buy the unit and
Mhm.
then they're kind of left alone to figure it out?
So, well, they buy the unit, but what I need to know is, because my stations need to have impact. You can't just buy the unit and not use it, right? You can't just buy the unit to say you look good. So my water meters that are inside the unit are going to come with the purchase. You're going to be able to. I'm going to have a remote tracking of them. So for up to a year, I'm going to pay that subscription, and then I'm going to know if they're being used, right? I'm going to know what my impact is, because that's what matters for my company. Those are my wins. So I can't just sell the product and say, "Oh, I'm doing sales." Like what really matters is the mission. So if I have sell a trillion water stations but they're not being used, then I need to change something. So after a year, if the customer, wants to continue knowing the impact and I want to keep, I think they can purchase this annual package. But technically it is like kind of like a, once it's assembled, it's very simple. There's maintenance to be done, the client does that themselves, but the tracking metrics is something I want to work with the partner, the client, and at the end of the year deliver them a report to show what they've done, and they can add that to their CSR reports.
Yeah, amazing. I imagine your internal dashboard of metrics is not just business related, but also like how you're reducing waste, etc. So very interesting model.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe what final question about, to bug you about the state of the industry, like, well, what's the state of renewables today? Like, how early are we? How much more is there left?
Sorry, you kind of chopped up the renewables. You mean like renewables for?
So for everything that has to do, so I'll ask the question again. I'll cut this part out.
Yeah.
I'd be curious to get your feedback on what's the state of renewables when it comes to like one-time use items that we're currently throwing away, like packaging.
Mm.
How it seems like we're still pretty early, so I'd be curious to get your feedback on the state of the industry.
Um, this is a huge question. I mean, I'm I think as where we are right now, in my point of view, where I'm living and where I've lived in California, I've lived in yes, Island. I know. I know you're going to edit this part there. Hi, hi. The throwaway culture for me is still heavily prominent. There's no, I mean, now everyone's just throwing things away and putting them to secondhand shops, thinking that they're going to have another life. But there's so much purchase of virgin products still, and there's a really big crash. Or right now with COVID, recyclable plastic is like really fearful. Recycled plastic and everyone's afraid of it, and they want, the plastic industry has plummeted because less people, not the plastic industry, sorry, the fossil fuel industry is plummeting because less people are driving. But now virgin plastics are being allocated to make all this enhanced PPE equipment and everything. So they're celebrating, and recycled plastic is just sitting there. There's not even recycling. I don't know if you remember, but at the beginning of COVID, recycling was stopped for months because of contamination or fear of picking it up, or not. There's not even a market for it right now. So we're so far away from shifting away from virgin items and going to the renewable composites and materials. I mean, what I can do for my stations right now is technically, he's crying, so maybe we could just
Yeah.
chat and talk about it.
Well, I think. Yeah. Well, Rachel, I think this has been great for me. I know Island,
Yeah,
your son has been a great participant,
good.
and I think he's calling an end to the interview.
Yeah, I think so.
Then he's like, "Okay, this is it. Interview's over." Maybe a final question, and then I'll let you
Yeah,
go and
sure.
chill with Island. Is where can people find more information
Yeah.
about what you guys are doing at Green Stop and now with the new brand with
Okay. Yeah.
OLand?
Sure. Yes. So you guys, as we wrap this up, and as he's calling my name, I would love to share more and learn more about anyone who wants to seek out our solution and how I could help their company or city or venue. So you can find us at olandstations.com all together. And my LinkedIn is my full name. I guess you can share that afterwards, Rachel Labbe-Bellas. And still visit me on Instagram and Facebook. The Green Stop company is still the holding company, but we have the OLand access redirect. So we're very much a prominent, and you can reach me as easily as you want, whenever you want. It just might take me a while to get back to you.
No worries at all.
Thank you, babe.
Congratulations again. Your son is beautiful. Thank you for your time, and
Thank you.
yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you for featuring us. It's great. It's great to share.